Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Snow fell outside the window in large flakes, settling on the windowsill like a fluffy blanket. The kitchen smelled of roasted meat and fresh baking. I wiped my sweaty forehead with the back of my hand and looked at the clock. 11:01 p.m. One more hour until midnight, until the ball dropped, after which my life would change forever. But I didn't know that yet. The table groaned with food. I had been cooking for 3 days straight, roasted turkey with apples, salads, appetizers, desserts. My hands ached from endless vegetable chopping. My back throbbed from standing at the stove. But did it matter? After all, I was a good wife, right? A good daughter-in-law, one who did everything right. The guests had already settled at the table. My mother-in-law, Patricia, sat at the head like a queen on her throne. Her massive figure in a dark dress with golden patterns radiated self-satisfaction. Next to her sat my husband Brian, scrolling through something on his phone with a distracted look. His sister Linda, with her husband and 2 children, occupied the right side of the table. A few more relatives and Patricia's neighbor Mrs. Anderson, who my mother-in-law always invited to show off my handiwork. "Emily, where's the main course?" Patricia's demanding voice rang out. "We've been sitting here for half an hour." I hurried to bring out the turkey. The heavy roasting pan burned my hands even through the oven mitts. I placed the dish in the center of the table, and everyone immediately reached to serve themselves. "Well, finally," my mother-in-law grumbled. I was beginning to think we'd ring in the new year hungry. No one said thank you. No one asked if I was tired. I sat down in my place at the very end of the table, next to the children, and poured myself some sparkling water. We hadn't opened the champagne yet. That was a sacred ritual, to be performed exactly at midnight. "Brian, pass your mother the salad," Patricia ordered. Brian dutifully obeyed. He was always obedient. 42 years old, and still Mommy's boy. When we met 8 years ago, I didn't notice it, or didn't want to notice it. He seemed so reliable, so stable. I worked as a manager at a construction company, earned good money, was independent. But after the wedding, everything somehow imperceptibly changed. At first, Patricia started dropping by our place without warning. Then she began giving advice on running the household. Then those pieces of advice turned into orders. And Brian, he just shrugged and said, "But Mom means well." Means well for whom? He never asked that question. 3 years ago, his business failed. A small appliance repair shop closed, leaving only debts behind. Since then, I became the sole breadwinner in the family. Brian, of course, looked for work. At least, that's what he said, but the search stretched on for months, then years. He found plenty of reasons why the job openings didn't suit him. The salary was too low, the schedule was inconvenient, the management was weird. But Patricia was always there to remind me how lucky I was to have such a wonderful husband. "My Brian will show what he's made of yet." "You'll see," she repeated. "He's just waiting for the right moment." The right moment never came. I worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'd come home and start my second shift, dinner, cleaning, laundry. On weekends, deep cleaning, grocery shopping for the week, meal prep. Brian, meanwhile, lay on the couch staring at his phone or went to his mom's to help, though I never noticed any signs of his help in her apartment. And I was also paying Patricia's bills. It started as a temporary measure. Her Social Security wasn't enough for utilities, supposedly. The temporary measure turned into a permanent obligation. Every month, about $1,500 from my salary went to Patricia's apartment. Plus, I bought her groceries, medications, sometimes clothing. "Emily, why aren't you eating?" Linda asked, chewing a piece of turkey. "Did it not turn out good?" Everyone turned to look at me. I felt my cheeks begin to burn. "No, I'm just not very hungry." "Strange," Linda drawled. "You cooked for 3 days and you're not eating. Maybe you deliberately added something." She laughed, clearly joking, but the laugh sounded somehow unpleasant. The others joined in the laughter, except for Mrs. Anderson, who looked at me sympathetically and shook her head. I picked up my fork and put a little salad on my plate. I had absolutely no appetite, but I needed to keep up appearances. There was a lump in my throat that made it hard to swallow. A week ago, something happened that I couldn't get out of my head. I came home early. They let us go early from work because of pre-holiday rush. I climbed the stairs. The elevator in our building was always broken, and heard voices from the apartment. The door was ajar. I was about to walk in when I heard Patricia's words. Yes, she should be grateful that such a man married her. My Brian is handsome, smart, golden hands. And her? Well, what does she represent? A gray mouse. Nothing special to look at. At least she makes money. Thanks for that. I froze on the threshold, unable to either enter or leave. Mom, come on, Brian's voice rang out, but there was no condemnation in it. More like slight embarrassment. Don't say that. Oh, come on, son, we're family here, the mother-in-law continued. I wouldn't say it to her face, of course, but between us, you could have found someone better. Remember Julie Stevens? She was in love with you. Now she's a big executive at a bank. Car, her own apartment, and a beauty. But you married this one. Mom, enough! Brian raised his voice and my heart fluttered. Now he'll defend me. Now he'll say that he loves me, that I'm the best for him. This one suits me fine, he finished. She's quiet, doesn't make scenes, brings in money. She'll do. As if I were a backup option, as if they tolerated me out of convenience. I quietly closed the door and went downstairs. I sat on a bench by the entrance for about 20 minutes until my tears dried and my face returned to normal. Then I went upstairs, slammed the door loudly, and called out that I was home. No one came out to greet me. Since that day, something inside me broke. I continued to fulfill my duties, cook, clean, work, give money, but I did it mechanically like a robot. Inside, emptiness settled. Or not emptiness, but something cold and hard, like a piece of ice that slowly grew with each passing day. Pour me some more juice, Emily, Patricia ordered. I stood up and poured. I sat back down and looked at Brian. He was enthusiastically telling his brother-in-law something about football, not even glancing in my direction. Oh, Emily, where are your famous cookies? Mrs. Anderson asked. You promised to bake them. I had forgotten about them. It completely slipped my mind because, after that overheard conversation, I didn't care anymore. I didn't care if they liked the food. I didn't care if anyone said thank you. I didn't have time, I answered shortly. How didn't you have time? Patricia frowned. You were home for 3 days. I wasn't sitting at home. I was slaving away in the kitchen. I wanted to shout, but I kept quiet. It's okay, Mrs. Anderson interjected peacefully. Everything here is delicious anyway. Well done, Emily, you've outdone yourself. It was the first and last warm word of the entire evening. Time dragged on. The guests ate, drank, talked. I sat in my corner, occasionally getting up to serve something or clear dirty dishes. Patricia directed the process like a general on a battlefield, issuing orders left and right. Brian nodded and smiled. Linda gossiped with the neighbor. The children played under the table, periodically kicking my legs. And I thought about my life, about how 8 years ago I was a completely different person. I had plans, dreams, ambitions. I wanted to grow to department head, buy my own bigger apartment, travel to Europe. I loved to read, went to shows with friends, did yoga. All of that disappeared somewhere. Friends stopped inviting me because I refused too often, had to cook, had to visit my mother-in-law, had to help Brian. I hadn't been to a show in 3 years. Books lay on the shelf untouched. Yoga? When was there time for it, if after work the second shift began? Even my appearance changed. I used to take care of myself, manicures, styled hair, nice clothes. Now I walked around in faded jeans and a sweater. My hands had roughened from constant contact with water and cleaning products. My hair, I just pulled back in a ponytail, no time or energy for anything more. And why bother? Brian didn't notice me anyway. To him, I was just part of the furniture. Convenient, functional, requiring no attention. "She'll do," his words echoed in my head again. The icy lump in my chest grew even bigger. 11:45, Linda announced. Time to get the champagne ready. The fuss began. Brian opened the fridge and took out the bottles. Everyone bustled about, pouring sparkling wine into glasses. Patricia rose majestically from the table. Now. Before we ring in the new year, I want to give out gifts." Gifts? I had completely forgotten. My gifts to the family lay under the artificial Christmas tree. I had spent almost half of my December paycheck. I bought Brian expensive headphones he'd been wanting for a long time. Patricia got a warm cashmere scarf and gloves. Linda and her family got gift sets, toys for the children, everything beautifully wrapped with bows. My mother-in-law began ceremoniously handing out packages. Linda squealed with delight, unwrapping a new thermos. Her husband received a tool set. The children got candy and small toys. Mrs. Anderson got a box of chocolates. "And now for our dear daughter-in-law," Patricia pronounced in a tone that made me wary. She handed me a mop, an ordinary plastic mop with a green scrubber on the end. I stared at it, not understanding. This was a joke, a prank, but then my mother-in-law placed a plastic bucket next to me. The complete set. "There's your gift, according to your status." She laughed, loudly, boisterously. Linda giggled. Her husband coughed awkwardly. The children stared at me curiously. Mrs. Anderson looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Mom, that's not right," Brian muttered, but there was no outrage in his voice. More like mild disapproval, as if his mother had chosen the wrong shape for a vase. "Oh, come on, son," Patricia waved her hand. "Emily here is a practical girl. Such a gift is just right for her. Right, Emily?" Everyone was looking at me, waiting for a reaction. They probably thought I would smile embarrassedly, say something like "thank you," just what I needed, and everything would continue as before. But something inside me clicked. That icy lump that had been growing for the past week suddenly transformed into something else. Not into fire, nothing hot. More like a crystal. Hard, sharp, transparent. I suddenly saw everything with absolute clarity. 8 years. 8 years I had carried this family on my shoulders. Cooked, cleaned, did laundry, earned money, paid other people's bills, bought other people's medications, fed other people's relatives. Gave up my own life, my own plans, my own dreams. And in return, I received indifference from my husband, contempt from my mother-in-law, the status of unpaid help, a gift according to my status. That's exactly how they saw me. Not as a wife, not as a person, just labor, a function. Someone who cooks, cleans, and brings in money. I looked at the mop in my hands, then at the bucket, then at Patricia's satisfied face, at Mrs. Anderson's embarrassed one, at Brian's indifferent one. "Thank you," I said quietly. Very telling. My voice sounded strange. Calm, even too calm. Patricia nodded with satisfaction, apparently taking my tone for submission. She returned to the table, and everyone bustled about again. Less than 10 minutes until the ball dropped. I carefully placed the mop in the corner, set the bucket next to it, sat back down at the table, and poured myself some champagne. My hands were absolutely steady. On TV, the countdown began. Everyone fell silent, their eyes glued to the screen. I wasn't watching the TV, but their faces, how Patricia nodded importantly at the words from the screen, as if personally participating in running the country. How Brian mechanically reached for the plate of appetizers, not even looking at what he was taking. How Linda whispered something to her husband, and both of them smirked. They were all here at this table, eating my food, sitting in my apartment. Yes, mine exactly, because we had taken out the mortgage in my name, and I had been paying it all these years. And they took it for granted like the air they breathed. Invisibly, naturally, without the slightest gratitude. The speech ended. The countdown began. "Faster, faster, pour it." Patricia fussed. The ball's about to drop. Everyone grabbed their glasses. Brian filled mine without even asking if I wanted it. The champagne bubbled, sparkling in the light from the garland on the tree. 10. On TV, they showed Times Square, where thousands of people were gathered for the countdown. 9. Linda hugged her children. Mrs. Anderson folded her hands on her chest, preparing to make a wish. 8. Patricia had already risen with her glass, clearly preparing for her traditional speech. Every year she went first with a toast, long and pompous, about family values and respecting elders. 7. I also stood up. Slowly, unhurriedly, I took my glass. The cool crystal pleasantly chilled my palm. 6. In my chest there was no longer any ice, no emptiness. There settled a strange lightness, as if I had been carrying a backpack full of rocks on my shoulders for years, and finally threw it off. 5. Brian looked at me and smiled, perfunctorily, mindlessly. That smile he gave to everyone. Store clerks, neighbors in the elevator, his mother. Nothing personal. 4. I smiled back. I wonder if he noticed that my smile didn't reach my eyes. 3. Patricia had already opened her mouth, ready to begin her speech, right after the final countdown. 2. Mrs. Anderson closed her eyes, making her wish. 1. Happy New Year, came from the TV. Music started. The ball dropped. Everyone shouted, applauded, began clinking glasses. Happiness, health, Happy New Year. Hooray! Patricia had already filled her lungs to pronounce her toast, but I beat her to it. Wait, I said. Not loudly, but everyone heard. Silence fell. Even the children stopped making noise, sensing something unusual in my voice. I want to make a toast, I continued, looking straight at my mother-in-law. May I? Patricia frowned, clearly displeased that she had been interrupted, but nodded. Well, go ahead. I raised my glass higher, looked at each person in turn, at Linda and her husband, at the children, at Mrs. Anderson, at Brian, at Patricia. Thank you for this evening, I began. Thank you for the gift, for the mop and bucket. You know, it really is a very appropriate gift. According to my status, as you said, Patricia. My mother-in-law nodded with satisfaction, not catching the trap. Because you're absolutely right, I continued, and my voice rang out like a taut string. This is exactly what I've been to you all these years. A mop, a bucket, a tool, a thing that's used and not thanked for. The smile on Patricia's face froze. Emily, what are you talking about? Brian spoke up. I turned to him. I'm talking about the fact that I finally understood. After 8 years. You know, I accidentally overheard your conversation last week. The one where your mom explained what a gray mouse I am and how unlucky you are. And you agreed. You said, I'll do because I'm quiet, don't make scenes, and bring in money. Brian's face turned red. Patricia opened her mouth, but I didn't let her get a word in. So here's what I want to toast to. Honesty. To the fact that today you finally showed me the truth without embellishment. I'm a servant. Unpaid, convenient, uncomplaining. I cook, clean, earn money and give it to you. I pay your mortgage, Patricia. Oh, yes. Don't think I don't know that you took out a loan a year ago and regularly use my transfers to pay it off. I buy you clothes, medications, groceries. I feed this entire family. And in return, I paused, enjoying the deathly silence. In return, I get a mop and bucket. How dare you? Patricia shrieked. How dare you speak to me like that? Very simply, I answered calmly. I'm telling the truth. What I should have said long ago. 8 years, Patricia. 8 years I bent over backward, endured, tried. I thought that if I was good enough, compliant enough, you would finally accept me, love me, respect me. But today's gift put everything in its place. Emily, calm down, Brian tried to intervene. It was just a joke. No need to react like this. A joke? I turned to him. 8 years, your mother has been humiliating me. Is that a joke? You lie on the couch while I run around like a squirrel in a wheel. Is that a joke? You live on my money and at the same time consider me unworthy of even basic respect. Is that also a joke? How dare you? Patricia started, but I interrupted her. I haven't finished my toast yet. So, I want a drink to change to the fact that this year will truly be new, because I accept your gift and draw conclusions. I took a sip of champagne. It seemed surprisingly delicious. Probably the first time all evening I actually tasted it. Starting January 1st, I continued, setting the glass on the table. Changes begin in my life. First, I'm no longer paying your bills, Patricia. None at all. Not utilities, not loans, not anything else. You get Social Security live on it. What? My mother-in-law jumped up from her chair. You're obligated. I'm your husband's mother. I'm not obligated to anyone, I cut her off. And your Social Security is your concern, not mine. Second, I will no longer be cooking for the whole family. Want to eat, Brian? Welcome to the kitchen. The stove works. Third, cleaning the apartment is now split in half. You live here, you clean. I'm not your mother and not your servant. You've lost your mind, Brian shouted, also jumping up. Do you understand what you're saying? For the first time in 8 years, I understand exactly, I answered. Fourth, and most important, this apartment is in my name. I pay the mortgage. That means it's my home, and I want you to move out. A ringing silence fell. Even the music from the TV seemed to quiet down. You're kicking me out. Brian looked at me as if I had just confessed to murder. Your own husband. I'm asking you to find other housing, I corrected. You can move in with your mom. I'm sure she'll be happy. By law, the apartment is mine, bought before marriage. The mortgage is in my name. I made the payments. You have no rights to it. I specifically checked this the day before yesterday. Spent the evening studying forums, lawyer consultations. I bought the apartment 6 months before the wedding. Took out the loan in my own name. Everything's correct. Everything's legal. Brian has no claim to this property. You've gone crazy, Patricia shrieked. Linda, call a doctor. She's lost her mind. Linda froze with her phone in hand, not knowing what to do. Her husband coughed awkwardly. Mrs. Anderson sat with wide eyes, covering her mouth with her hand. No one's calling anyone, I said calmly. I'm absolutely sound of mind. Moreover, for the first time in many years, I'm thinking clearly. Brian, you have 2 weeks to pack your things and leave. That's more than enough time. But what about family? Brian muttered. We're husband and wife. Husband and wife, I smirked. A husband is someone who loves, supports, respects. You're just a tenant who doesn't pay rent. A parasite, if we're calling things by their proper names. How dare you? Patricia took a step toward me, and for a second I thought she would hit me. But I didn't back down. I dare, I answered. Because this is my life, my money, my apartment, my decision. And you know what? Your gift turned out to be the best thing that's happened to me in all these years. Because it opened my eyes. Thank you for that. Sincerely. I finished the champagne and set the glass on the table. And now I'm going to my bedroom. You can finish eating or leave. I don't care. Just don't forget to clean up after yourselves. I turned and walked to the door. Behind me erupted a chorus of voices, screams, curses, wailing. Patricia was screeching something about ingratitude and disgrace. Brian was calling me, demanding I come back and explain myself. Linda was hollering that I was destroying the family. I closed the bedroom door behind me and turned the key in the lock. I sat on the bed, and only then did I allow myself to shake. What had I done? My God, what had I done? My hands were trembling. My heart was pounding, so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. My ears were ringing. But along with the horror of my own boldness came something else. Relief. Enormous, all-consuming relief. As if I had been carrying a sack of stones on my shoulders for years, and finally threw it down. I had told the truth. Finally. Behind the door, the noise continued. I could hear the slamming of doors, footsteps, voices. Then the front door slammed once, twice, 3 times. Apparently, the guests had scattered. No surprise. Who wants to ring in the new year in the middle of a family scandal? Silence fell. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. On the TV in the living room, festive music was still playing. Brian had apparently forgotten to turn it off. Absurd, false cheerful. It sounded like mockery. There was a knock on the door. "Emily," came Brian's voice. Lost, pathetic. "Emily, open up. Let's talk." I said nothing. "Please. I understand you're tired, stressed. Mom really didn't think about the gift. But that's no reason. Come on, Emily." I got up and approached the door, but didn't open it. "Brian," I said through the closed door, "I've said everything I wanted to say. 2 weeks. During that time, you'll pack your things and move out. This is not up for discussion. You can't just, I have rights. I'm your husband." "You have no rights," I answered. "You can consult with a lawyer if you don't believe me. And as a husband, you only existed on paper. In reality, you were a freeloader. So that's it." Anger crept into his voice. 8 years and that's it? You're just throwing me out." "You threw yourself out," I answered wearily, many years ago, when you decided you could live at my expense while not respecting me. "But I loved you." I smirked, though he couldn't see it. "Loved? You don't even know what my favorite color is, what music I listen to, what I dream about. You don't even remember my birthday without your mom reminding you. That's not love, Brian. That's habit, convenience, but not love." He fell silent. Then I heard footsteps. He walked away from the door. I returned to bed, pulled out my phone, and wrote a message to my friend Katie. We hadn't talked in almost a year. I was always busy, always putting off meetings. "Katie, sorry for the late message. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk." The reply came almost immediately. She apparently wasn't sleeping either, ringing in the new year. "Emily, of course. Everything okay? You scared me. Everything will be okay. Finally, I'll tell you when we meet." I put down the phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow a new life would begin. Scary? Yes. Unfamiliar? Absolutely. But for the first time in many years, I felt alive. Real. Free. The mop and bucket stood in the corner of the living room like a monument to my past. But that past ended exactly at midnight, and ahead was something new. And though it was still unclear, frightening, unpredictable, it was mine. Only mine. The morning of January 1st, I stayed in my bedroom, not opening the door. I heard Brian pacing around the apartment, muttering something, calling someone on the phone. Then the front door slammed. He left, probably to his mother's. I came out of the room only after making sure the apartment was empty. The living room greeted me with a scene of devastation. Dirty plates on the table, spilled wine on the tablecloth, napkins on the floor. The remains of a celebration that ended so unexpectedly for everyone except me. The mop and bucket still stood in the corner. I looked at them for a long moment. Then I took them and carried them to the storage closet. Let them stand there as a reminder of what was and what would never happen again. I didn't clean the table. Let Brian clean it when he returned. If he returned today, I made myself coffee, sat by the window, and watched the snowy yard. Children were sledding, laughing. Somewhere in the distance, belated fireworks were exploding. An ordinary New Year's morning. The phone rang. "Patricia." I declined the call. She called again. Declined again. On the third attempt, I just blocked her number. Then I blocked Linda, who had also started calling. At 2 p.m., Katie came. We had arranged to meet at my place. I didn't want to go out, and the conversation promised to be long. "Emily, what happened?" Katie came in, looking at my face with concern. "You look strange. And why is there such a mess in the kitchen?" I made us tea and told her everything. About the 8 years of life, about the overheard conversation, about the mop and bucket, about my New Year's toast. Katie listened without interrupting, and her eyes grew wider and wider. My God, Emily, she exhaled when I finished. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I'm glad. Glad you finally did this. But why did you keep quiet for so many years? Why didn't you tell me anything? I was ashamed, I admitted. Ashamed to admit that I let myself be used. That I turned into a doormat everyone wiped their feet on. And then I convinced myself it was normal, that a wife should take care of her husband, that you need to respect your elders, that family is sacred. Only no one explained that, in a family, respect should be mutual. Katie reached out and squeezed my hand. You're incredibly brave. Honestly, I admire you. What now? Will he really move out? He has to, I said. By law, the apartment is mine. If he refuses to leave voluntarily, I'll have to go to court. But the lawyer confirmed I have every chance. Bought before marriage, registered in my name. I made all the payments myself. All the documents are saved. And divorce? I thought about it. Probably yes. Though I don't know. Everything happened so fast. For now, the main thing is to breathe, start living for myself. We'll see from there. We sat until evening talking. Katie told me about her life, about work, about everything that had happened in all those months while we hadn't been in touch. It was so good, so easy, like in the old days when I wasn't married yet and could just relax with a friend. Listen, how about this weekend we go somewhere? Katie suggested before leaving. To a movie or a cafe, or just to the mall to walk around. Like we used to. Yes, I smiled. I'd really like that. After she left, I set about cleaning up. Not because I had to, but simply because it was unpleasant for me to see this mess. I cleaned slowly, without hurrying, putting on music and singing along. When was the last time I did that? Brian returned late in the evening. I heard him open the door, walk into the living room, and stop, seeing the cleanliness. He probably expected me to clean up after him as always. He knocked on the bedroom door. Emily, can I come in? No, I answered. What do you want? A pause. I talked to Mom, and with a lawyer too. They say you're right. The apartment is yours. I have no claim to it. That's right, I said dryly. And what now? I'll find housing. Maybe I'll rent something, or really move in with Mom for a while. But, Emily, does it have to be so drastic? We can try again. I'll change, I promise. I'll find a real job. I'll help around the house. I will. Brian, I interrupted. How many times over these years have you promised to change? 10, 20? And what changed? He was silent. Nothing, I answered for him. Because you don't want to change. Everything suited you. I wasn't satisfied, but who cared about that? But we've been together so many years. Together? I stood up and approached the door, but didn't open it. We weren't together, Brian. You were with your mom, with your phone, with the couch. I was separately at work in the kitchen doing chores. We just existed in the same space. That's not living together. So it's all decided? There were hurt notes in his voice. You've already decided everything for me? Yes, I said firmly. 2 weeks, Brian. After that, if you don't leave on your own, I'll go to court. He stood by the door for a while longer, then went away to the living room. All night I heard him tossing and turning there, apparently settling on the couch. The days after, the next few days were strange. We existed in the same apartment, barely intersecting. I left for work early, came home late. Brian did something in the living room, talked on the phone, sometimes tried to start a conversation, to persuade, to make me feel guilty, to blame. I didn't fall for the provocations. On the 4th day after New Year's, he moved out, just packed his things and left, leaving the keys on the table. No farewell scenes, no last attempts at reconciliation. I was left alone in my apartment, in silence, in a space that was now completely mine. The first few days were unusual, even a little scary. All these years I had gotten used to someone's presence, even if indifferent, and now there was no one, just me. But then the fear passed, giving way to something else. Freedom. I could go to bed when I wanted, cook what I liked, not what my mother-in-law demanded, watch series until morning or read a book in bed, not think about needing to iron my husband's shirt or run to the store for groceries for his mother. I could just live for myself. On the weekend, Katie dragged me shopping. I bought myself new clothes for the first time in several years. A beautiful dress I had wanted for a long time but always thought was extravagant. Heels, makeup. You're transforming before my eyes, Katie smiled, watching me try on another outfit. Seriously, Emily, you're glowing from within. And it was true. I felt different, as if I had shed someone else's tight skin and finally become myself. 2 weeks later, an unknown number called me. I answered cautiously. What if it was Patricia calling from a new phone? Emily Harper, came a man's voice. This is Attorney Sokoloff. I represent Brian Anderson. My heart sank. I'm listening. My client would like to discuss the terms of property division. What property? I interrupted. We have no joint property. The apartment is mine, bought before marriage. There's no car. What else is there to divide? There are certain nuances that my client would like. Tell your client, I said coldly, that if something doesn't suit him, I'm ready to meet in court. All my documents are in order, including utility bill receipts. I paid them a loan for 8 years and can prove it. So if your client wants a war, please, only he'll lose it. The lawyer fell silent, apparently not expecting such a rebuff. I'll pass on your words, he finally said and hung up. Brian didn't call again. Apparently, the lawyer explained to him that he had no chance. A month passed, then a second. I gradually returned to life, to the life I once loved and had abandoned for the illusion of family happiness. I started meeting with friends again. We went to a show premiere. I cried from happiness, feeling the magic of the stage again. I enrolled in interior design courses, a long-time dream I never had time for. At work, they noticed the changes. My boss called me in and offered a promotion, senior manager position with a raise. Before, I would have doubted, decided I couldn't handle it, that it was too much responsibility. Now I agreed without hesitation. The money that used to go to supporting Brian and his mother, I began spending on myself. I did renovations in the apartment, not major, but enough to change the atmosphere. I threw out the old furniture that my mother-in-law had chosen. I bought new furniture that I liked. One day I ran into Mrs. Anderson at the store. She stopped, confused, not knowing if she should approach. "Hello, Emily," she said quietly. "Hello." I smiled at her. I held no grudge against her. She was the only one who didn't laugh that night. "How are you?" she asked, and there was genuine care in her voice. "Good," I answered honestly. "Very good." Mrs. Anderson nodded. "You know, that New Year's night, I wanted to say something, to stand up for you. But I was afraid of Patricia. She's so formidable. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive." I touched her hand. I stood up for myself. Finally. "Good for you." She squeezed my palm. "You did the right thing. They were wearing you down, completely. And you're such a good girl, hardworking. You deserve better." We chatted a bit more and parted ways. This was the only encounter with anyone from that evening. For months later, spring came imperceptibly. The snow melted. The first leaves appeared on the trees. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee and watched the awakening city. For months had passed since that New Year's Eve. For months of a new life. Was it scary? Yes. Were there doubts? Of course. Sometimes late at night, I thought, what if I made a mistake? What if I should have given one more chance? What if I acted too hastily? But then I remembered the mop and bucket. I remembered Brian's words, "She'll do." I remembered 8 years when I was nothing, a function, a convenience, a tool, and the doubts disappeared. I looked at my apartment, at the new curtains, at the bookshelf with books I was finally reading, at the framed certificate for my courses on the wall, at the photo with friends taken last week. In it, I was smiling a real smile that reached my eyes. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a different person. Not the tired, downtrodden woman with a dull gaze, but someone alive, bright, free. They thought they humiliated me with that gift. Thought they put me in my place, showed me my status. But in reality, they gave me the best gift of my life. They opened my eyes, pulled me out of the swamp I was stuck in, gave me the push I needed, but wasn't brave enough to make myself. The mop and bucket still stand in the storage closet. Sometimes I see them when I'm getting something from the shelf, and each time I smile because these simple, cheap things meant to humiliate me actually freed me. They became a symbol of the end of my old life and the beginning of a new one. That New Year's night, I made a toast that destroyed the illusion of family happiness but built a real life. My life. And you know what? I don't regret anything. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Katie, Emily, hi. Listen, we're getting together this weekend to go out of town. Barbecue, nature, relaxation. Will you come? Of course I'll come, I smiled. With pleasure. I hung up and looked out the window again. The sun was shining brightly, promising a warm day. Somewhere out there in this big city, Brian and his mother lived. Patricia probably still told all her acquaintances what an ungrateful, cruel, heartless person I was. Brian probably complained to friends about his evil wife who kicked him out of his own home. Let them talk, let them think what they want. I knew the truth. I wasn't cruel. I was finally fair to myself. Not heartless, but found my heart, which I almost lost in that relationship. Not ungrateful. I just stopped being grateful for humiliation. Sometimes the cruelest gift becomes the key to freedom. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom to push off and surface. Sometimes an ending isn't a tragedy, but a new beginning. That New Year's night, with the ball dropping, I spoke words that changed everything. Words that returned me to myself. And that was the best thing I could have done.